Hello and welcome to this video for the juvenile justice class. In this course, we are going to examine Erikson's 8 stages of psychosocial development. You can see the 8 stages on the screen. For Erikson, and his theory was roughly developed in the first half of the 20th century, very big from the 1950s through the 1980s, when being taught in education classes and psych classes and all sorts of classes. But this theory was very popular from the 50s through the 80s. The idea of Erikson is that in each stage of life, there is a psychosocial struggle that we need to resolve in order to move to the next stage in a healthy way. The first stage is trust versus mistrust. In this stage, the new infant up to 18 years or 18 months old, that is, struggles to develop trust in others. Now, if that infant has a really good parent or set of parents, that is individuals who take care of them, and they change their diapers when they need change. They feed them on a regular basis. They comfort them. They rock them. They hold them. Then the theory is that that child will learn the trust that it needs to learn to launch into the next stage. Because as a child is trying to learn to be autonomous, they have to have trust in others in order to be able to be autonomous. And autonomy versus shame and doubt is the second stage. But imagine that a newborn baby turns 18 months old and then is into their second year, and they've learned that the world is completely untrustworthy. The people in it are completely untrustworthy. And now over the next 2 years, 1 to 2 years, they're going to try to develop this sense of autonomy. Well, they can't trust the world, so they're afraid to go out into the world and realize that they are a separate person. So they develop this sense of shame and doubt in themselves because they don't see themselves as separate from their surroundings. And then moving into this autonomy is initiative versus guilt. Once I understand that I'm an autonomous person, separate from my parents, then I begin to understand that I have initiative, that there are things that I can do. And so I begin to learn that I'm capable of things. It's 3 to 5 years old that we start to see children really develop their tendencies towards their favorite toys and things like that. Not that we don't see it at a younger age, but they become more industrious with it. By the way, that leads us into industry versus inferiority. Now notice that these are all how the individual sees themselves in relation to the larger social world. So industry versus inferiority. This is where the child struggles for self-confidence. And this is roughly 6 to 11 years old. And if they have self-confidence, if they come out of this with confidence in themselves, now I'm not talking about selfishness or overconfidence, but just a good amount of confidence. They come out of this and entering into identity versus identity confusion. Then as they're developing their identity, who they are in relationship to others, they have a much stronger sense of self, a sense of their identity. If not, then they struggle even more, and they might come out of this with confusion. Well, if they're confused about who they are, how in the world can they have intimacy with others? And that's the next stage, intimacy versus isolation. So roughly 19 to 40 years old. This is where individuals are struggling to build strong relationships. And then based on these strong relationships that they've built, they enter the generativity versus isolation stage, which is 40 to 65 years old. I am nearing the end of this stage, and I can tell you unequivocally that I agree with Erikson on this. When you get to be my age, you start to want to make sure that you're leaving something for others. Not that they can remember your name even, but that you want to make sure that when you are gone, you've made the world around you a better place. And then once the individual reaches around 65 years old, now remember these age categories are kind of fluid. They're not exact for everybody. So they're suggestions, they're guidelines, but they're not hard and fast rules. But when the individual reaches around 65 years old and until the time of their death, the struggle is integrity versus despair. So does this person get to the end of their life with a sense of who they are, that they've accomplished things, that they've had really strong relationships, and that they know that they've done the right things? Or do they have despair? Are they despairing that their life is winding down? Now, I want you to think in terms of juvenile justice. So industry versus inferiority and identity versus identity confusion are the two most significant ones that you will encounter at the time that you work with juveniles. But keep in mind, the three preceding that, the first three, may not have been resolved in the healthy way. It might have been resolved in the unhealthy way. So they might have gotten out of the first stage with basic mistrust of others and themselves and the world. They might have gotten out of the second stage with a lot of shame and doubt in themselves. And that shame and doubt might have led to really struggling in the third one. So they come out of that with a lot of guilt. So now here they are, 6 to 11 years old, and they're struggling to engage in things, to start to build something, to just for confidence in themselves. Unfortunately, this is grade school and the first part of middle school. And then they get into middle school for identity versus confusion, and they get bullied in middle school, or they are the bully in middle school. But they might not fit in with the crowd, and this is where they begin to see themselves in a way that is not healthy for those around them. In other words, they might come out with an identity that results in a lot of violence towards others, even if it's on the mild end of the spectrum of violence. But this is something that we have to be aware of. So I'm going to stop my screen share so that you can see my face. So I just want to say that it's very important to understand these theories of human development that we're going to be covering. So we'll see you next video.